Good day, everyone. We are Amicus Brain. Amicus Brain Innovations, Inc. is a digital health technology startup focused on bringing the power of artificial intelligence technology, AI technology, to transform care management for people living with neurodegenerative disorders. We're about making technology solutions available to everyone to reduce caregiver stressors, increase self-efficacy, and enable people living with dementia to remain at home longer. Our AI advisor apps make dementia caregiving easier, taking out the complexity and saving precious time over the progression of the disease. As we wrap up the month of September, World Alzheimer's Month, we're delighted to bring 3 experienced dementia caregivers together for a candid conversation to share their journey along a multi-year arc of caregiving. The first part of the event will be facilitated by Geeta. As a second part, I'll come into the conversation and ask how technology could have provided the timely, meaningful support they needed as caregivers throughout dementia progression. We'll then conclude with questions and answers. As you listen, please use the chat to share your experiences, make your comments, and raise questions. Now, over to Geeta.
Thank you, Edie, for the introduction. And I want to thank Amicus Brain Innovations for hosting this session, this conversation with my dear friends, Ishwar and Jayashree from Michigan. I'm currently in Mumbai. And so this is an example of technology bringing us together in a conversation. I was in Michigan for a long time, most of my adult life, actually, 30 years, nearly 30 years. And I grew up in Mumbai, moved to the US as a student. I went to Michigan State University to get my MBA. Then I continued there with multinational companies, implementing financial systems and consulting type roles for nearly 30 years. And then in 2017, I had to take a career break. It was an unexpected, unplanned pause. My parents were living with me in Michigan at that time. He was in his 90s. He had been showing signs of dementia for a while, for about a year. And then I decided to leave my job. And then I moved to India after that in 2018 and came back here. My father passed away in 2020. So I met Ishwar and Jayashree in 2017, and that was interesting how we met. I think maybe 6 months before I left the US, 6 or 8 months. I may have already left my job at that time, and I get this call, unexpected call from Ishwar. I didn't know him at all. He lived about a mile away from me in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and he was a caregiver. He had heard about me from acquaintances in Columbus, Ohio, where my sister lives. And he just called to say hello and introduced himself and said he had, offered his help. So for me, caregivers out there will know how lonely caregiving can be. So it is a very lonely life because you kind of withdraw from many things that you're used to doing. My life, I'm a single person, and I've always been single, and so I was used to leading a very independent life, but that changed, and I had left my job, so this became my world, and him calling was sort of my lifeline. And then he sat with my father a few times, actually, when I had to run errands or take my mom for appointments. And I think I learned my initial caregiving lessons. I still preach to other people these first principles of caregiving. I think I learned from Jayashree and Ishwar, like walk into their world, do not use logic, do not argue. And I have also seen him talk to my father so beautifully, using anecdotes that he had heard before from my father. And I had the pleasure of meeting his parents as well. And so I had their support until I left. And even after I came here, we kept in touch. So that is how we met. So I want to now ask Ishwar and Jayashree to introduce themselves. And I want to say a thank you. And I want to tell you how much your support has meant to me all through my caregiving journey.
It's totally mutual.
Can everybody hear Jayashree?
Good morning and namaste, because I see most of you are probably in India. So we just want to be, yes, caregiving can get very, very lonely, and you are thrust into it. You never are fully prepared for it because it hits you with such, suddenness, and it's unexpected, and you're totally unprepared for it. You just don't train, and, dementia is such a difficult disease. Each individual is so different. It is not like a physical ailment where the same medication can work for different people. The symptoms are different, the behaviors are different, and there are so many misconceptions out there about dementia that it's just about memory loss. So you've got to educate people as to why it's not just memory loss, it's so many other things. But yes, like Geeta, we also moved to the US about 25 years ago. I'm a librarian by training, so I worked in public libraries. And that's what I did for the most part, till a time came like Geeta when I had to make a choice. I had actually 3 people in the family who actually were sick at the same time. So my dad had major issues. Mom was, of course, having significant dementia issues, and Jayashree herself started having health issues. And that was the time I decided. And we were actually living in 2 separate states at the time. So I decided that I needed to step away and do this full time. In retrospect, I would have done things differently. We will talk about that towards the end. But let me let Jayashree speak about her experience, her background.
So as Ishwar mentioned, we came here about 25 years ago, and I've kind of spent my life entirely in the insurance industry. So when Edie talks about technology and AI, it's very close to my heart because it's something that we saw growing as a fledgling initiative in the insurance industry and really take flight. And it's made a big difference. So I can see that making a significant impact in the healthcare space as well, especially for elders, and especially in the US, where we are a very, very aging population. A lot of us are older. So when Ishwar took a break and we kind of moved, here's another thing we learned. Every change has a significant impact on the person suffering from dementia. In this case, it was his mom. And every time you move a house, move homes, every time you move from state to state, every time you just rearrange your furniture, it causes a significant deterioration in the person's ability to navigate and remember where things are, where the bathroom is, where you keep things, where things are in the kitchen so they can help themselves. So as much constancy as possible is helpful in this stage. And as Ishwar said, there are precious few people that understand and are able to support another caregiver. In our case, our first support was Ishwar's uncle, whose mom also had dementia, and she spent the last year or so in an assisted living facility it was a lockdown facility, and he would call. So his mom and his uncle are cousins, and he would call and say silly things on the phone, and my mother-in-law would laugh. That was the only time she laughed, because otherwise, there was this constant negative emotion swirling around her. And so whenever you got her to laugh, you don't keep your dignity, you let your dignity down, and you do stupid things, you do silly things, and they will laugh. And that does a whole lot for their mood, and in turn for your own moods.
Yeah, and speaking about Geeta, we also very, very unexpectedly found out that we were actually well known to her elder sister's husband, with whom we lived in, when we lived in Calcutta many, many years ago. Actually, we are distantly related to that gentleman's side of the family. So at the end of the day, it's a really, really small world. It's phenomenal how certain things happen. But yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Geeta's parents. We visited her mom and her dad. I think it was a couple of years ago, Geeta, December of 19.
Yeah, before COVID. Yeah.
He had declined to the point that he was not able to, carry on a conversation with me. But I really enjoyed the days where I was able to spend some time with him and learn. And that's one of the themes that, in case I don't get to speak about it, I think what's very, very critical is that you've got to find joy in what you're doing. And you do that by celebrating their lives, by celebrating the things that they enjoy doing, whether it's cooking, whether it's painting, whether it's music, and then and then record it. Geeta is doing a phenomenal job of actually recording all those interactions with her parents as they are aging, because that time is going to come when they're not going to be with us, and then you're going to regret the fact, well, I wish I had a recording of their voice. I wish I had a recording of how they looked or how they spoke. So to all those out there who are listening, find joy in what you're doing. I know it's very difficult, and celebrate their lives and also record some of those interactions.
We talk
Yeah,
a
well
lot.
said. For me, I look at my journey as in two parts. The first half where I was struggling and I had all the negative emotions, resentment, why me, and self-pity and all that. But I think the second half, strangely, it was harder because, Jayashree, you mentioned that any change it pushes them to a different level. And that's what happened. I moved across the ocean to a different continent, and my father moved to a different level. Instantly he needed help with bathing and a lot of things that he could do on his own before, and he could never find the bathroom after that. But the second half, when I accepted this is the version of my father, and I saw that he still has feelings and emotions, the ability to be happy, and he loved sweets and he loved it. So we used everything. And there were still anecdotes that I would repeat. I learned to repeat, like with children, you tell the same stories over and over again, and we laugh. I learned to laugh with them over the same joke over and over again. So that made my, till the end, even when he lost all ability to speak, I could still connect with him. And I think I got really much closer to my father. And so I look at it as a blessing that I was able to, this is one of the hardest things anybody will do, and I don't want anyone to go through it, but there is a positive, you can find joy in it, and by shifting the focus a little bit. Yeah. So I think it makes sense to start at the beginning. So for me, initially my level of information and knowledge about dementia, I didn't know what caregiving meant. I didn't know I was a caregiver, was zero. And, but I saw that my father was different. He was someone who was very independent, and he was still independent to a great extent. But there were things that he was doing that was more than just old age. He was beginning to forget where he was, even though we had lived in the same house for 4 years. And so there were many things like that. And then there was sundowning every evening. He would get confused and he would think he was in a train. So I was lucky to have a doctor in the family. My sister asked me to take him to a neurologist. And then he was diagnosed with mild to moderate cognitive impairment. And at that time, I did not understand, the word dementia was not used. I did not know that it was an early stage dementia. So can you talk about your early stage? How did you know to get her diagnosed? How did you go about this?
Well, there were initial episodes of forgetfulness that we ascribe to old age, and so we started mentioning that to the doctor, and then the doctor then initially referred us to a geriatric assessment facility where they actually put you through a battery of tests, both verbal and I guess visual. And then there were early signs that yes, this was leading towards dementia. Then she would forget that people had called, that nobody's calling me anymore. They had moved to the US by then. So isolation can sometimes be a huge thing. And then one thing we discovered during this journey is that families begin to you become very isolated. It's not just you as the individual caregiver who gets isolated. But I think people stop calling people because they don't know what to talk. They don't know how to deal with this person who is now a different person. And so she was forgetting things. She once left the stove on all night. Those were not specifically, things that we could ascribe to old age. And someone who's been so sharp and so meticulous all her life, So there was, yes, so there was initial signs, and then the assessment proved that there was some dementia. The first primary care doctor that we spoke to did suggest that we started off on a mild dose of, I think it was Aricept, donepezil, but those were early days. We were on the fence. This was a new disease for us. And we had read a lot about, okay, you know, what is this? What really does this accomplish? There's no real cure for the disease. What are we doing? Are there undesirable side effects? So we made the conscious decision to not medicate in the initial years, which in retrospect, you know, you can argue. We also had a couple of very close doctor friends with whom we used to share all these experiences. And then they basically said, you know what? I mean, it's really about the curve of the disease, how the disease progresses. You could go like this, and suddenly, you know, towards the end, it would go precipitously decline, or you could just go in a more gradual. So we chose not to medicate initially.
Initially, yeah. But I think the fact that we diagnosed her in 2006 and she passed away in 2018, I think the drugs we started sometime in around 2011 actually helped. They helped probably her have a better quality of life for a longer number of years. And towards the end, of course, it was precipitous. The last year was pretty bad. I just want to go back to the support system and the family and isolation. There is also, you know, we talk about denial in the immediate family. The spouse may be in denial. The worst thing that helps is when you reach out to extended family and you start talking to them, and when they are in denial, it hurts you as a caregiver. And that is something that you need to realize, that you're not going to get the support from every part of your network. There are some parts that will be more supportive than others, and it's okay. And you lean on the parts that are supportive, and you kind of don't take into cognizance the part that is not supportive. Yeah. And that can be a huge drain on a caregiver's emotional energy.
But the astonishing thing which I've heard about dementia patients is when they are with other folks, or when they're talking to people on the phone, they somehow are able to come across in such a normal manner that the person who's listening to them is left wondering, this person is fine. They are just, there's nothing wrong with this person. How are you saying that this person is?
See,
this ability of...
Yes, that's a great point, because I'm part of many online support groups. I was going to mention that later on when we talk about technology. So that is one way I got my support, because there's not many people, like Jayashree said, who know about dementia, or even they want to deny it. In fact, when I moved here, I ran into someone on the street and I said, "How's your dad?" And I said, "He has Alzheimer." "Oh, that happens, old age, it happens to everyone." They kind of dismiss it. So for me, the support, came from the online support groups quite a bit. And that's where I learned, most of the information. And it gets lonely, that makes it lonely. But, in Ishwar, that is one of the things that you pointed me to, the local support group. So I went there and it was just wonderful. And I knew throughout till the end, I used that as my lifeline.
And the thing is, doctors can only do so much. So you've got a primary care physician, you will probably refer you to a neurologist. But the one missing link that we discovered much, much later was the absolute critical need to have a geriatric psychiatrist who would address all the behavior issues. The PCP, the family doctor and the neurologist are good. They will treat the symptom. But as you know, many of the medications that are used in dementia care are not necessarily dementia medications. They treat psychotic behavior, or they treat hallucinations and those things. And they come from a wholly different antipsychotic family of drugs, which have very undesirable side effects. The two main drugs, from what I know still, that are used just for dementia care are Aricept and Namenda. And they've been trying to find a cure now for many, many, many years. And we all know about all the failed trials. But it is extremely important for any person caring for their family, for their loved one, to do a lot of self-education. you've got to read up on, there's a book called The 36-Hour Day. And that's the first book you should pick up and read. And there's a new edition of that just come out.
Oh, we can hear you.
Go closer.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so there's a new edition of the 36-Hour Day, which is the Bible actually of
Yes.
Alzheimer's caregiving. And that goes into such excruciating, it's a very difficult book to read. But boy, I mean, this is a very difficult disease to deal with. So, but you've got to attend your workshop. There are caregiving workshops. Hopefully they're doing them in India and other countries now. There's more, there's increased awareness of this, that this is a real disease and not just a symptom of old age. You've got to, if there are doctors in your immediate family or friends, circle, reach out to them and try to gather as much information as possible. Go and attend a, like a workshop or a expo. I mean, we are fortunate in Michigan. We have an annual caregivers workshop. So they bring together all these experts from dementia care. They bring people from nursing homes. They bring people from, the medical fields and all the technology fields. And it's a whole day where people just share information and you gather so much and you share so much. So it's very important for you to continue to keep up on your own. Because again, as I said, the doctors, and sometimes the doctors are just, disease is so different with each person.
Correct.
Geeta's dad didn't have the same symptoms as my mom had.
Exactly.
They had different symptoms, it's the same disease.
I was just going to mention that because we had, and we made different decisions as well because of that. Because I chose to never give him medication. He was prescribed the Exelon patch. And it's the same thing, same concerns that you had, about the side effects. And for me, because I felt so alone in the decision making, and I felt, oh, what if something happens? If he has a side effect, this is a known evil is better than, the unknown side effects. I don't want to deal with it. So I never gave him. But when we moved to India, his symptoms worsened. And in the beginning, there was a lot of screaming at night and wanting, he wanted to get out of the house, and a lot of that happening, aggression. He was quite strong. So I just wanted to sleep at night. That's what I used to pray for. So I called the doctor and I said, I just want him to sleep. And he gave him some, it's the same thing, what you mentioned. There are a lot of these antipsychotic medicines, and I don't remember which, it's one of the medicines that you're familiar with. I gave him a small minuscule dose, and it's again trial and error. They start with a low dose and they see if it works or it doesn't work, and they switch you to a different medication because all patients are not the same. Then I stopped after the first dose because it made things so much worse for him. Then I never gave him anything except melatonin, just a baby dose of melatonin just to make him sleep. But what happened in the course of my journey was I learned more and I became better equipped to handle things. And I also knew the patterns. Okay, if he's aggressive, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things I can do, redirect. I try to find out why he's like this. Did something happen? In the environment is something, that I need to correct. So the obvious, and then usually after 2 hours, he will be tired and he'll be okay. So I figured out the pattern, and also I got help. See, that is the reason I moved to India. So I got 24-hour help, and that was a learning curve for me too, because in the US, you're used to doing everything. And here I had to pull away. Things don't have to be perfect. And it gave me my me time. I could move away from him. I don't have to sit with him for 24 hours. So there's somebody taking care of him. He's safe. It doesn't have to be perfect, but he's safe and he's taken care of. So that was my experience. I want you to talk about some of you alluded to, it becomes about the behavioral issues, right? A lot of the things, the challenges. What were some of the challenges that you experienced with your mom, because they were different from what I experienced? So can you talk about some of those and how you handle them?
A multitude of behavioral issues, and it is that.
We are not able to hear you, Jayashree.
Is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
she had a multitude of behavioral issues at different stages, The earliest was, and typically what happens is there is some physical issue that then gets enlarged into a behavioral pattern or some kind of psychological aspects to that. So she was diagnosed with floaters in the eye, and that's pretty common as you age. And she started imagining that those floaters were insects that were residing in her eye. And her concern was that, she felt that her hair was causing the insects to breed. So she started using scissors in the bathroom to cut her hair, and she'd have a patch of hair gone. We got terrified that she would hurt herself. So we hid all the scissors. And then, this is the sad part, she started plucking every hair on her head. She went completely bald in a matter of a month because she plucked every strand of hair on her head. And then it kind of subsided because there wasn't the hair. And we don't know if the floaters kind of subsided, but then that phase subsided. She would have, so this was the visual stuff. She would hear auditory hallucinations. She would have auditory hallucinations. She would imagine people in the family fighting, and she would say, look, they're fighting, they're yelling at each other, go stop them. And so there were those, and they would ebb and flow. And every time it kind of came down, we would heave a sigh of relief. But the next time it picked up, it was worse yet. I think 2017, the year before she passed, was the worst. And that was when Ishwar was home all the time. And there was a day when he had gone to the caregivers meeting, the Alzheimer's meeting, support group. My father-in-law was in the bathroom. My mother-in-law this was, I think, November. She was in February. She was in a thin sweater, and she was just wearing household slippers. She walked out the door. Michigan has got a lot of snow. And she walked out the door not appropriately attired because she thought her brother was lost. And she went out to the main street to go bring him back. My father-in-law comes out, sees the main doors open, runs after her. Luckily, he catches her, brings her back. And then we started locking the doors. And then we realized we needed 24-hour care, even when we go out for an hour for a caregivers meeting. And I think that is something that everybody needs to evaluate. When do you, as a caregiver, need support, external support? When do you need to bring in an external paid caregiver to help you? Because the longer you wait, the less you are helping your own mental makeup.
Yes.
And you stress yourself, you let your blood sugar go up, you let your blood pressure go up. It's not helpful for you. Ishwar has a very sobering statistic about caregivers.
Yeah, I mean, I read somewhere that a big percentage, more than 50% of people who are caring for dementia patients actually pass before their loved ones do.
Yes, I've heard that.
That was, and that's because.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I'm losing
We need to get closer.
Yeah. Is that better? Sorry, we have this new computer.
But
and I
I've
think
heard that stats too. I've heard that a lot of the caregivers pass before the loved ones.
when mom had the issues with the floaters, she would stop eating because every time she looked down at her plate of food, she would see worms in the plate because she would think that these worms are coming out of her eye and they are flowing into the plate. And so she started losing weight, and that resulted in the plucking of hair. She also had sundowning symptoms. Usually around 4:30, she would pack up her little, pack of belongings into 2 bags, and then she would say, "I want to go home." And that was one of the most difficult, phases where we tried to reason with her and say, "Mom, this is home. This is home." Well, then we realized that logic doesn't work. So
yes,
I would try to
was
distract.
feeling.
Many days I would just take her out. I would just say, "Okay, you want to go home? Let's go home." So literally in the dress that she was wearing, I would just take her out for a spin. We would go to a grocery store, we would go to a temple, or we would go somewhere, distract her for an hour or so and bring her back. And then that would pass.
And that worked for a little bit. Things change. So you have to evolve with the changing disease as well.
Yeah, we become creative, right? With that. So
And you also learn to lie. It's called therapeutic lying.
But I did that with my dad. Would always want to go home was one of the things, and then also he would want to see his mom. And initially, just like yourself, I would try to use logic. You're 94 years old. How can your mom be still living? I would try, or he would say he doesn't have any money, and I would try to tell him, remember you worked at this place and you saved up so much money, etc. But then I started telling him, okay, why don't we go see your mom tomorrow? May I go with you? It became like it calmed him down. Oh yes, okay, we are going tomorrow. But I knew that he's not going to remember that, right? So I want to talk about some of the decisions, that we make as caregivers, the major decisions. We make decisions every day. But for you and me, for me, I decided to quit my job and move to India. And there were other decisions, such as when COVID started. I had this decision of, because there were so many things unknown, there was so much fear, and a lot of people stopped attendance from coming to their homes. But I made the decision saying, well, you prioritize. It's my sanity or COVID. So I was willing to take that risk, and I had the attendance coming in throughout till he died, and luckily nobody was infected. So there were decisions made. I had to make the decision about medication, for example, to medicate or not. And so what were some of the major decisions that you had to make as a caregiver?
But as we alluded to earlier, to medicate or not to medicate was one of the first things. And then we started seeing some of the benefits of medication. So
it also depends on the age of the patient. So in your case, your dad was 90 when you diagnosed. In our case, his mom was in the late 60s, early 70s, late 60s when she was diagnosed, and early 70s when we started treating her. So I think that makes a big difference too, because you want quality of life for the person if they are younger still. And then I think back to medicate or not to medicate, to provide help yourself or to bring in somebody from the outside. It's a cost either way. You lose your income or you spend more. So that is a decision. Whether or not you want to move into a smaller space, because people tend to get lost, especially in the US, where you have larger homes and you worry about, they don't know where the kitchen is, they don't know where to go, they're just standing at the head of the stairs and saying, I don't know this place, I don't know where to go. So downsizing versus not downsizing is another situation. Getting external care versus not is another one. Every time you go to the psychiatrist and you read the side effects of those drugs, you're making decisions on what is the outcome, the pros versus the cons. You make those decisions on whether or not sleep after 5 months. It started around a little before Thanksgiving, and until Easter, mom did not sleep at all. She would have hallucinations. She'd go screaming from window to window, and Ishwar would be up with her. I was working, so I'd go to sleep, but he would be up with her, and he'd catch, cat naps during the day. When you don't get REM sleep, you don't function well. So that pros and cons about whether or not you use those drugs that have some horrendous side effects, or do you really want 2 nights of shut eye, both for her and for him? Those are tough decisions.
I know what Ishwar went through to some extent, and what I don't understand, Ishwar, is how did you remain so poised? How did you take it? No,
appearances can be very deceptive.
You had the bandwidth to call me and offer me support, and every time until I left, I know you were already going through all this when I met you, but it's just amazing, and I want to say thank you, and you have done an amazing job. So how did you see? We are all human and we have physical limitations, and sleep, oh my God, I would go insane if I didn't get sleep. How did you take care of yourself? What did you do to preserve your sanity and then be there for your mom? Because especially in the US, of getting affordable help, that is also an issue. And that is one of the reasons I moved here, so I could hire 24-hour care.
Yeah. To answer your question, he didn't. He lost weight, his blood sugar shot up, and he was a wreck. But we didn't find we didn't know about the caregivers and how to go about evaluating them. We learned that a little later. So that was our eye opener. So for about 7 months, he didn't take care of himself. His only refuge was the caregivers support group. That was his only refuge. So physically, he didn't take care of himself. He didn't go for walks. He didn't have time to eat. He didn't have time he didn't sleep for I don't know how long. No REM sleep, and that shows on your body.
Yeah, I remember Mary when we met at the support group. Mary would always ask Ishwar, "How was your week? Did you get any sleep?" And so I knew that. For me, that was also a problem until I moved here. I would not sleep, but it wasn't as bad. I had other issues, but it wasn't as bad. But I still didn't sleep because I constantly worried about my dad. He would wake up at night 3 times. I knew his schedule. He would wake up 3 or 4 times to go to the bathroom, and I would hide and make sure he went safely and he was back in his bed and all that. So
one of the really one of the really wrenching decisions we kept, talking about whether to do or not was to, a stage was coming when we realized we just wouldn't be able to keep her at home. This was getting too much for us.
Yeah.
Should we get,
Yes, sir.
should we put her in a kind of a facility where they would take care of her 24/7? But then the more you read about what happens in some of those institutions, and again,
And the more you visit them.
yeah, I don't want to generalize, or I don't want to paint any of those, institutions in any poor light, but we've also heard from firsthand from people who place their loved ones in facilities like assisted living or nursing homes. I mean, you are just one among 40 or 50 people there, and would they get the same level of care as so basically, our conclusion was that let's find help and let's keep the person home, and let's enhance their quality of life as much as we can. So in retrospect, we should have gotten help much earlier. But it's also important to get the right kind of help. This is not just someone who
Yes.
come home and be a companion and spend and help taking the person to the toilet or restroom or give a person a bath. They should be well trained in how to address the behavioral issues. Because that is the biggest challenge of dementia. Now, what do you do if this person suddenly gets up and says, "I want to go home," or they say, "I just want to go up and I'm going to make myself a cup of tea," knowing full well that they have a strong risk of getting hurt or falling. So it's very, very, and you've got to go through many versions of different caregivers to actually find the right person at the end of the day.
Yes.
So in retrospect, I would have definitely found outside help earlier and should have taken better care of myself. Yeah. But
these are all lessons, because I look back on my, at my journey, and I feel I could have done things differently, but we all made, especially self-care, I think it needs to be a priority. I want to underline that for all caregivers, because everything else, it's, you make a decision and you could do things differently. For example, when my father passed away, it was a urinary infection. How do they die? There has to be a reason. They stop eating, they forget how to swallow, something happens. So it was a urinary infection for a month, and I had to make decisions for his care, medical care, about, we couldn't give him, he needed an IV, he had a resistant infection. So I knew that I was not going to hospitalize him. And IV for 7 days was, you can imagine, it's going to be impossible. He's going to pull it out and we can't poke him every day. So anyway, he deteriorated to the point in the last 4 days, he didn't speak. It was, almost, he sensed me. But, I want to point out, even then, I have this moment I will never forget. The day before he died, we were on a video call with my sister, and I just showed, he was just like a log. I would prop him up and put him on my lap, and he would just stare at me. And I just said, "This is Usha," and they were watching. He suddenly, out of nowhere, took my hand and he gave it a kiss. So these are moments. And then before that, 4 days before, the last thing he said to me was, screaming in the middle of the night. And I would run, even though I had a care attendant, I would run to him and I just hugged him and I said, "You are suffering so much." And he just patted me on my back and said, "Don't worry." That's the last thing he spoke to me. And I want to bring these up because it is horrible, some of the things that you go through. But there are these moments where they tell you that they're still there, they're still there, and they feel you, they feel your love. And the decision, that I sometimes go back to and say, okay, could I have done something differently, was the oxygen. Do I give oxygen or no? Do I prolong his life or no? These are all the decisions that, that you can always question, but I think I want to tell everyone, whatever you do, other than self-care, please do that. Don't leave yourself an option. Take care of yourself. Everything else, you can do it in multiple ways, and it's okay. You're doing the best you can do. used respite care, right? Can you talk about that? Because I know you, towards the end of life, I think you
Yeah,
used
just before that, I realized I didn't really answer the question about how I cope. I think every one of us has a coping mechanism within themselves. It could be a spiritual issue. It could be like your religion, or it could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be
Art.
just art, or taking long walks, or getting away from it all for about an hour. When the caregiver is home, just walk away from it for an hour or two and do something, even if it means just taking a longer shower than you would normally, or just sit in the bathtub. I mean, we are lucky to have bathtubs here. So find those precious 15 minutes or 30 minutes. They may not be long stretches of time when you can just walk away from it. And try to tell yourself, when you see all those behaviors, it's not the individual, but it's the disease. I mean, that you've got to make that distinction. This is not your mother talking or your father talking. It's the disease that's doing all this. So make that distinction. So towards the end, she began to have repeated falls.
Urinary tract infections.
And thank you for bringing up the UTIs. That can cause huge changes
In behavior.
in behavior and mental status. Oh my goodness. And we didn't catch that. I mean, there was a time when she became so aggressive, so violent. She would use words, terms of speech, filthy words. I mean, then you keep wondering, where did all this come from? And she would get extremely, aggressive and violent. And we didn't make the connection that there is a huge connection between urinary tract infections and altered mental status, as they say. And it took us several months to figure that out. And once the doctor diagnosed that, then, of course, many of those issues went away. But again, we changed homes in Michigan. We moved to a different location to be close to I decided eventually to go back to work. Once we got full-time, because there was so much pressure from this person here. She was getting really worried. I had lost about 35 to 40 pounds. And her mom had visited. Everyone who watched, looked at me said, "What's wrong with you?" And my family doctor, bless his heart, he just sat me down one day and said, "You know what? What you're doing is absolutely wrong. Your mother's going to be around. I'm going to speak to you very, very plainly here. So don't get me wrong. Your mother is going to be around for 2 or 3 years, okay? And then she's going to be gone. But you are going to be around for the next 30 years. And you've got to decide, are you going to be at the same burden that you think your mom has been on you to your loved ones for the next, is that the life you want to choose for yourself? You've got to take care of yourself, and giving up your job and sitting at home and trying to say that you're the caregiver just doesn't cut it. Get help, do the best you can, understand you cannot do this 24/7. So I went back to work, and we had, good help. Luckily, initially we had some difficulty, but we had some good help. Her mother was also visiting, so that was a big help. But towards the end, she began to start having falls. She had multiple falls towards the end. Every time she would fall, she would hit her head in some part of the head, or the skull area, and there would be bleeding, and then
lots of ER visits.
Stitches. Finally, we came to the point where we brought in hospice. We talked to the geriatric psychiatrist. And again, there's a misconception about hospice. Hospice does not necessarily mean end of life.
That's what I can.
Yes, it can mean that you're at a certain stage where you want to just have more close monitoring. You want to get away from all the medications and see. And then the doctor will, at least in this country, they will reevaluate it in 6 months and see, okay, does this person they can get back to their normal life, or do they continue to be on hospice? In mom's case, we started visiting nurses,
This was in-home hospice.
And that was great, because when the nurses start coming home during hospice, they are now communicating with the doctors on a daily basis. They are seeing the symptoms, they're seeing the changes. And I know I'm jumping ahead to the technology piece, but if there's one piece of technology that I wish we had, was something that you could wear that would monitor the person's symptoms or the behaviors and send some kind of a signal to the psychiatrist or to the neurologist or to the physician and say, this is what's going on in this person's life. Because you get 30 minutes in, say, 6 months on a 6-month interval to see one of these specialists. And you're trying to say all these things to them in those 30 or 60 minutes when you've experienced it all through, I know with blood sugar, for example, control, your blood sugar
There it
meters are
is.
now connected to your doctor's offices, and now they are
blood pressure.
monitoring blood pressure, blood, even diabetes, you're now being monitored 24/7. Is there a way that, through AI or through some kind of technology,
You can monitor
you
behavior.
can monitor behavior changes on an ongoing basis and send those signals, if you will, to the affected specialties? But anyway, coming back to hospice, we brought in home hospice. Again, during the hospice, they basically withdraw most of the medications and they just leave you with
Essentials.
just essential pain killing, or just to provide you with comfort care, just to keep you comfortable. She had another fall when that happened at home. She bled profusely from her head. But you cannot take a person on hospice to the emergency room.
You could, but you would pull yourself out of the hospital.
Yeah, you'd have to pull yourself out of hospice. That's the one thing. I don't know how it is in India or other countries, but here it is like that. So we had to wait for the nurse to come. That took some time, and then she would pull all the bandages and the dressings out.
And it'll start bleeding again.
It'll start bleeding all over again. And that's when we decided this was the time. Was this the tipping point? Is this the time to put mom, say, in a group home or in a facility? Luckily, the same hospice that we were using also has a residential facility, and they had respite care for a week. So we took advantage of that and say, hey, let's get 1 week of respite care. Let's figure this whole thing out. Let's talk to all our relatives and our friends and say, okay, what are our options here? Because we just cannot manage this at home anymore. And then luckily we got into the hospice. They took one look at her and said, she's not going home. She cannot go home in this condition. So they actually started processing her for long-term hospice in the same facility. And fortunately, it was approved. But literally the second day she was in the facility, the doctors come, she starts slipping into this kind of coma-like state. And then the doctor calls us that same evening and tells us, your mom is actively dying. That was the biggest shock of our lives. I mean, this went from person really healthy, fully in control.
One day she had a good dinner. I fed her, and she, instead of water, I gave her Sprite. And then I realized she doesn't drink any soda. So I said, I'll go get water. So she said, no, this is very tasty. Let me drink it. And she was having this active conversation with us after so long. And then Tuesday, she goes into this decline.
And then a week later, she's gone. So literally the day she was supposed to have started her long-term hospice care, I mean, in the facility, she passed before that. So she ensured that she would never live in an institution. And that's
I remember you telling me that you have to get to the point of letting them go. Also, I had to do that with my father. Tell him that it's okay for him to go. And I think you did that as well, right?
So I would stay overnight at the hospice when the rest of the family would go home. The doctor said, we have just one son. And so he basically said, call him. This was about the first week of December. And we said, no, he is coming during Christmas. And he says, no, call him right now because she won't be around here for Christmas. So that's when we began to appreciate the gravity of the situation. So we called him. Luckily, he was able to come over from Chicago. And I stayed the first 2 or 3 nights. And then the nurse, bless their hearts, the hospice nurses are angels. They are, and I'm sure, Edie, you've also experienced that in your situation. But this lady takes us aside and say, you know what, your mom is actively dying, but you are holding her back by constantly being around her, by being constantly, you're staying night and day, and you need to go whisper in her ear that, Mom, it's okay to go, that we will take care of Dad, because I'm sure she's worried about Dad. So each one of you needs to go and tell her that it's okay to go. You've done all your duties. You've fulfilled all your responsibilities. You've raised all, your children, your grandchildren. You've done everything. So we can let, so that was the letting go piece. Very difficult. So literally the last night that she lived, we walked away. 2 hours later, we get a call saying that she's passed. And so, I still wrestle with that decision. Did I make the right decision? I was not there by her side when she, breathed her last. Isn't that something that any dutiful, son should have done? But then I also look at what the hospice nurse with all their experience told me.
Yeah. See, Ishwar, you're not alone in this, because I lived in the same house. I made some decisions, you made some different decisions, and I still look back on that day, and I was with my dad throughout the day, and for 15 minutes I left the room. I came to my room and the attendant came knocking on the door, and I still ask, oh, I was not there. Actually, so it is never enough. That is how our minds work. But maybe another way to look at it is only when we leave their side or they go. So I just want to say one thing, because for the Indian audience, Indian caregivers, because you talked about hospice, and then we'll move to the technology piece, which ED will lead. So the last few days, my thinking was the same. I just wanted my father to be comfortable. I knew he was not able to communicate, but I knew he's probably in pain. So in my support group, I just posted saying, is there an equivalent of hospice care here? Because that's what if I were in the US, that's what I would do. So he was it was his last few days, I knew that. So I was referred to a palliative care doctor, and wonderful. She called me, and I'm still in touch with her. She has not treated my father, but wonderful lady, Dr. Rajam, I want to recognize her. So I was supposed to have a Zoom call with her to evaluate and what they could do, but that was the day my father passed away. So there may be options here. I don't know enough about palliative care. I don't think they equate to what you have in the US, the hospice care, but there may be similar, if not exactly the same resources available. So
I recently, sorry to cut you off. I recently came across a facility, again, for the Bombay audiences in Thane. I think I sent you a link.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so that's something we might, and this is an institution that has just started recently to provide Alzheimer's care. Specifically. I know there is a facility, I think, in Coimbatore.
Yeah, there are a few care homes. That do exist. So ED, if you can hear us, if you can unmute yourself and take over.
Let's that the end of life stories are heart-wrenching, and so let's go back to the beginning of your journey when you became a caregiver. Can you say, Jayashree and Ishwar, could you say a little bit about where did you get your information? How did you learn to become a caregiver?
Well, I'm a trained librarian, and research comes very easy to us librarians. So we had a wealth of information in any public library in the US that you walk into, and that's one of the things I really wish the Indian library system was as well developed. But today there's so much available online. So to all those who are actually watching or listening, the Alzheimer's Association is a phenomenal resource. I don't know if there's a chapter of that in India, but just Google Alzheimer's Association. They talk about the initial signs, what to look for.
Closer, come closer.
Oh, sorry.
They talk about
what the difference is between just simply aging and dementia and actual dementia, the different types of dementia. There are any number of dementias. There's frontal temporal dementia, there's Lewy body dementia, there's Parkinson's, there are so many other conditions that mimic dementia, but that are not necessarily dementia. So again, finding a care group or a support group is huge, because now you're actually interacting with people that are in the same journey with you. And like I say, like we've all talked about, every journey is different. Pick up those books that that are listed in the Alzheimer's site. There's so many videos on YouTube. I think it is Teepa Snow, right?
Snow is well known.
Teepa Snow is a phenomenal resource in this whole Alzheimer's dementia space. And she's put out so many videos where you can actually, you can relate to them. You say, oh yeah, that's my mom right there, or that's my dad. And then if you have a couple of doctor friends in the family, that is huge, or friends, because then you can at least reach out to them and interact and talk. And then, because it can get pretty lonely. And then you've just got to find these and now there are a lot of online support groups if you can't get out of the house. I know Geeta does a lot of good work with groups, that are
Oh.
discussion groups.
We keep losing you. Yeah.
Stay close to the microphone so we can hear you.
For
Yeah, the
some reason,
problem as I research into the diseases other than dementia, even I think one of the problems is there's such an overload of information, and finding trustworthy info. You're a librarian, and you're describing a long program of research here. So I'm glad the information is out there, but it's hard to sift through everything. Geeta, perhaps want to talk about how you found resources that you needed? Because I think part of it is understanding, and the other part is how do you get the help you needed? How did you find the respite care you needed?
So for me, it was, initially the first source of information when I went to the neurologist's office, they gave me a whole bunch of pamphlets. So, and also there are books, like you said, the 36 hour day, right? I have the book, I haven't read it. So because I was so overwhelmed, I actually gave all the pamphlets to my sister and I said, can you please read and just tell me what I need to know? So, because it has to be very easy, quick, easily consumable answers. So for me, later on, it was online. I was in support groups. I learned a lot from asking. I would just look. I never used to participate, but I would read answers about urinary infection or behavioral problems. And so a lot of the online support groups for dementia and Alzheimer's, I learned a lot. But what I wish, was there was no one source that I went to. It was like I learned something from Ishwar and Jayashree. And then my cousin told me about the Department of Aging. So I had never heard of it. So it came from all over the place. So I think one thing I really wish is, okay, you go to a primary care. I wish the general practitioners in India and primary care physicians, they were more informed about dementia and they could direct you to point you to a resource. Either it's like the Care Companion, you guys are, if it has all the information, it's like a supermarket for dementia and Alzheimer's type information, everything was there about care facilities, all vetted, you have all the research that you do by Googling and by reading library books and all that. If there was one place where I could ask the question and I get good information, I think that, because time is of the essence. I don't have the time to really spend a lot of time on research and calling different people. So I think that is my wish list for dementia information.
It gets you back to a 34-hour day instead of a 36-hour day. Right?
Exactly.
So I'd like to just make a comment to the participants that are on the line here. Would you please start putting your questions in the chat so that Shri will call on people in a few minutes and we'll take Q&A. I have one or two more questions though before we get to that. We're talking about what you wish you had had. What kind of technology did you use? Anything that really helped that you would advise other people to lean on?
I used mostly YouTube, like Ishwar mentioned. So I've watched a ton of videos on different topics. Like I want to go home. I would just type, I want to go home, and it would tell me about how to deal with that situation. So T-Personal, and there are others as well. And then the support groups. I also use technology to entertain my father, because my father, he was forgetting his prayers and that made him sad and depressed. So I would play that on YouTube and then he would chant along with that. So that is use of technology I use. And I have talked to Chitra, the founder of Amicus Brain. Initially, in the initial stages, isolation was a problem. And I would say, I wish there was technology where, to connect with other people of their age and they could spend time with them. Or I tried, my father had, he was blind, near blind macular because of age-related macular degeneration. So we couldn't use a lot of technology to keep them engaged. But I used to imagine, along with Chitra, is like, can we, because he keeps asking for his mom, can we simulate his mom? And she's talking from the iPad, from his iPad, and, that he can feel her presence and we can, this is just my imagination, So but I mainly used YouTube and Google, of course, and Facebook support groups. I don't know about Ishwar and Jayashree.
We probably used it mainly to communicate with loved ones, overseas, especially in India, because as we were pretty lonely back here, and I'm an only child and a very small family here in the US. So communication was important, so that at least she felt that they were her sisters or her brothers. They were there, and now she was able to see them. Of course, 5 minutes later, she would forget that the call even took place. But at
Yeah.
least for those 5 minutes or 10 minutes, there was joy that she was connecting with people.
We didn't have WhatsApp then, we had Skype. So we would do Skype video calls, and seeing them in person helped.
Yeah. Games we tried. I know there are a lot of brain games and art, and there are a lot of resources there that actually the loved one can actually go and try to entertain themselves, or you can entertain them. But we didn't do any of that because
She had a grandpad. The Caregivers, the company, actually provided us with. It wasn't called an iPad; it was called a grandpad. So it's less complicated, and there'd be a whole bunch of puzzles and coloring. You just touch them. But she would touch the wrong spot and get frustrated. So it didn't quite work the way we thought it would.
Yeah. You need a helper with them. You need someone to sit with them. Yeah.
But luckily, we also use that again, the same iPad for music to play.
Yes.
Some of her cousins are some of the leading violinists in India, and so she would suddenly say, "I wish I could see them." Well, sure enough, there's a recording of so and so on YouTube, and so we would play that. But again, going forward, I wish we had something again, like I mentioned, some kind of a monitoring device that could communicate with doctors and would give them a more first-hand view, if you will, of what this person is going through on a daily basis, rather than a 10-minute chat during during even a video interview, a video visit, or an in-person doctor visit. That's so woefully inadequate to describe all the symptoms that this person is going through.
Right.
They're rushed, and they have so limited time. But something that
Our actual solution to that, because we didn't have that facility, was to have the psychiatrist assigned a nurse to us. And this nurse would come in every day and check in on us, on all of us, not just mom. But she was also on call. So in the middle of the night, she's screaming and running around from window to window. We called Kathy, and she would be there in 5 minutes. She lived pretty close by. She would be there in 5 minutes in the middle of the night. So she saw it firsthand. It's not a recounted version from us. She saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
If that could be
No such a thing
translated through
existed.
some technology, that would be great.
Oh, that
Yeah,
is
not
wonderful.
not everyone is fortunate enough to have a
I didn't know.
psychiatric nurse on call. But
Yeah,
I
I
think
didn't
you
know that
bring
was.
out two different goals here that I think are both important. One is to have insight into the person living with dementia, and the other side is to have some support systems for the caregivers.
Yes.
As you said, people that are caregivers have such a disproportionate burden on them, placed by the necessities of caregiving. We're running out of time here, and before we go to questions and answers, so please put your questions in the chat. I'd like to ask you one more question. One last question for each of you. What advice would you give to new caregivers that are just starting out? Come close, can't hear you.
Well, I would say the first piece of advice is find a psychiatrist to be on your team. That's so important to address all the behaviors. I mean, it is absolutely critical to get a referral. I don't know how that works to get a specialist. Neurologists have good knowledge, but it's and especially the geriatric psychiatrist who's really trained in the elderly and the behaviors. That is very, very critical. Definitely get outside help. If you're fortunate that you have siblings in your family, that's great. You can share the burden. But one of the things we have heard is that oftentimes in the same family, siblings can be a source of they have different views on this on the disease or on what mom or dad's condition is, and there's a lot of tension among the siblings themselves. So get outside help. I'm happy to note that there is good help now available in India. So definitely get that. Like find joy. I mean, in all those difficult days and nights, find joy in all those little moments. For example, even when my mom was in her final stages, so one of the things we do as Hindus is we chant, a prayer. It's called the Vishnu Sahasranamam, which I think some of the Indian attendees will be familiar with. And we used to play that at, right by her website, right by her bedside. And during a certain stanza, I mean, she was sleeping right through it.
She was in a coma.
We thought she was in a coma. And then at a certain stage towards the end of that mantra, as we call it, she starts chanting along with it for just about 30 seconds or 40 seconds. And that's one of the most important pieces of that whole prayer. And then she lapses back into the coma. So clearly there was some piece of her mind, some piece of her brain that was still listening. They say hearing is the last to go. So find joy in, if it's painting, if it's coloring, if it's, word games, it's puzzles, it's music. Find that thing that, talk to family members and learn more about your loved one's childhood. A lot of the behaviors that you're seeing now have their roots going back 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Some trauma, some bad experience that this person had is causing them to remember that. Remember, as the day progresses, the patient recedes back in time, 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years. So by the time they are like, it's 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the evening, they are probably in their minds a 10-year-old child or an 8-year-old child, and they're remembering things. So when they say they want to go home, they are probably thinking, oh, I'm still in school, my dad is waiting, and if I don't go home on time, I'm going to be, severely reprimanded. So try to find out more about your loved one, where, the circumstances that they grew up with, the challenges that they faced. And so, for example, the geriatric psychiatrist diagnosed my mom with depression, which we never really pinpointed. And then she treated her for that, and that helped for a while. So yes. Anything else?
Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. That's the first, second, and third rule. Take care of yourself. Whether it is physical, whether it is mental, whether it is emotional, find people in the family, your friend group, your support group that will raise your energy levels and, make sure you protect your emotional health.
Yep.
Yeah, Geeta, any last comments?
Yeah, so I think most of the same things, I won't repeat them, but my caregiving journey became easier, and I was able to find joy once I accepted it. So accept that this is it for what it is. And my father was still there. It was just a different version of him. It's just like you have your child, and the child grows up, and you still love that person. They are different. So I find ways to connect with them still, because like Ishwar said, I would talk about anecdotes and experiences that he still remembered. If he remembered his mother, I talked about his mother, that whatever brought him joy. And if he remembered a piece of music, we would sing that song over and over together. And I have many videos. Make videos, please make videos, because I have documented. I have, when I'm really feeling down now, I actually go and search for it, Appa laughing, and then I get this video of him singing happy birthday to himself or something like that, So record, accept, and take care of yourself. That is very important, because if you are not feeling well, and you're not going to be able to take care of that person. There can be joy, and there can be quality of life for them. Their life is not over, and your life is not over, certainly.
Thank you. All of that advice it sounds very, very good to me. All right, so let's take some questions. Shri, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Before that, I just want to make a point. This whole conversation with Geeta, Ishwar and Jayashree, this is a very moving, very authentic conversation. And I want to again stress, the points that you made about self-care, and I'm sure our caregivers who have logged in are listening to that. So we do have a couple of questions. I'd like to highlight first one from Jason. So Jason, I know you typed in your question, but if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question to our speakers, you could do that as well.
By the way, Jason is from our support group here in Mumbai. I think that's him.
Yes, that's me. Hi, Geeta.
Hi, Jason.
So, hi. So my question was that being a caregiver, this whole experience, how did that change you as a person? As in, just to sort of give you a little context, my father is a early dementia patient, and I became sort of in the process, and I've just started a very empathetic person. As in, that's what my early takeaway is. What's yours? As in, what's been yours?
Yeah, I will. So for me, I think again, I look at my journey in two parts: the first half and the second half. First half, I didn't understand. There was ignorance and all that. So you think that they are not understanding. Some people say they're manipulative. None of that. I didn't understand the disease. But the second half brought me closer to my father. So yes, definitely, I look back and it has made me a lot more empathetic. And I think, I was able to walk into his world and look at things from his perspective. How does he see the world, and how can I then meet him where he is, So I think definitely yes. And I don't know, I hear my mom say that, we took good care of him. She says that because even for her, it was difficult to see your spouse, not recognize you. And for me, it was okay. My father doesn't recognize me. I know him. And all he needs to know is that he's loved and he can express love too. And I can receive it. It doesn't matter that he gives it to me as he's giving it to his daughter. So yes, so it did change me. I think it made me discover my own strength. I'm actually the youngest person in my family. I was always taken care of by my sisters and everybody. I was never the decision maker. But I look and I say, wow, I actually took care of my father through his dementia. So I feel proud too that, in discovering that the strength in me. So yes. Do you want to add to this?
Responsibility is something that you don't realize till the time the baton's passed to you, or you sort of take the baton in hand.
Yeah, because people come and go, right? People call and they go, but you're there every day. You show up for work every day and you're there for them. Yes, that they know that your dad knows that you're there. So Ishwar and Jayashree.
Hello, Jason. Again, that kudos to you for what you're doing. One of the empathy, patience, all of those are great things. But one of the relationships that really suffers when you are caregiving for an elder in the family is this relationship with your immediate spouse. That gets put on hold. And I don't know if you're single or you have a, but
I am married, and I'll tell you my experience too. But yeah, I want to listen to you.
So that gets put on hold, and even with your own children, you have very little time for all that. You are short with them. It's a very, very difficult phase of your life where your biggest focus is your loved one. And I sometimes have issues with the word caregiver. I think that's very inadequate. I mean, they didn't call our parents caregivers when we were growing up, right? When they were caring for us when we were children. So why should we be referred to as? I think that's a very exalted word that they kind of a label that's put on us. We're just doing our duty as children. But no, it does place a huge stress. So we've made a commitment to each other that, boy, we are going to, when the time comes, we are just going to take early retirement and we're going to give each other the lost time that we lost for at least, do all the traveling, do all the things that we wish we had done for the last 15 years, which we never got to do.
It was a long journey.
Because it was a 15-year journey from start to finish. Of course, we're still in caregiving mode. My dad is still with us. He's 91. But we made that commitment is that, and Jayashree also has her mom who's back home in India. It's taught us, I think, the value of those relationships, the value of finding time for each other. That, yeah, you can spend your whole life working and making money or whatever it is that you want to do, but then now you come away with a whole different perspective of life. You become more, in our case, I think both of us also became more spiritually inclined. We started learning some of the Hindu scriptures. Music is a huge thing. But we've just made that commitment that time is very, very valuable. Time is very limited in life, and that we want to share our information, little that we know, with everybody. And one of our goals is to, especially the elderly, and so many of the elderly, at least people are fortunate, and I'm sure the people who are listening in this program, there are families that are that are actually caring for their loved ones. We have heard so many stories of dementia patients or even elderly patients who have absolutely no family support, who are totally all by themselves, who are lonely. Can you imagine the lives that they are leading? And so, we also want to make a commitment to actually reach out to all the elderly in our family and give them the gift of little time that we have, because that's the biggest gift that you can give them. That's all they need. That's all they need. They need a little time from you. They need a little, attention, little love, TLC, as they say, tender, loving care. And I think it's taught us that there are better things or more important things in life than just
a career, climbing the corporate ladder. It has its place to get you money and get you all the comforts you need, but that in itself, at the end of the day, is not going to be enough. It's not going to sustain you.
So, yeah. I just want to quickly, if I can, Eddie, can I share something? There's a minute.
Quick. We're running out of time.
Yes. So, when I was sort of dating my wife, the first thing when I sort of realized when my dad got dementia, the first thing I did was go back to her and share this with her and ask her if she would be willing to sort of get on this journey, because otherwise it would have been sort of difficult. So that's what I sort of did, and when she said yes, that's when we sort of went ahead and shared, told their parents and got married. So just wanted
Good
to share
luck to you, Jason, and make sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take care of that beard. It looks really good on you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
So, Shri, there is another question. Or are we out of time?
Yeah, we are running out of time. But
if it's a quick one, we can just wrap it up.
There's one. Yeah, there's one question from Sonam, and so she wants to know what lifestyle changes would help both the patient and the caregiver.
With respect to the patient, feed them what they like. They are at a stage, they're whether they are diabetic, whether they have blood pressure, whether, feed them whatever they love, whether they like sweets, whether they like, salty things. Make sure they get some physical exercise. So in my case, I would take mom almost on a daily basis to the mall or to a grocery store. And, in this country, the grocery stores are huge grocery stores. So we would pick things up randomly from carts, and then I would just leave the cart in the store and come away. And we really wouldn't buy anything, because at the end of the day, at the end of the trip, she wouldn't remember what she bought. But I made her walk, like 3 times, 4 times. Gave her the exercise, gave me the exercise. And I think, again, I keep going back to the spiritual inclination. I think for me, that was very important. That was the rock solid support that I could turn to for, to sustain myself.
We are running out of time, so I'll just say one sentence in response to that is have routines. Routines are important, but be flexible. Have time at times when you do certain things, but it's okay to change because they may not cooperate. It's okay. Don't force things. Let them happen.
And if they don't want to have a bath on a given day, that's okay.
Yes, it's okay.
It's okay, because that time will come when in my case it happened. I think it happened in Geeta's dad case also. That they think they've already had a bath. So
it happens with an old person too. Like I'm dealing with them. I have a 92-year-old mom that I'm taking care of, and sometimes she doesn't want to do it, and she doesn't have dementia, and it's okay. It's all
exhausting for the elderly.
And Sonam, one other thing, sometimes you have to lie, and it's okay
Yes.
to lie. And I'll leave it at that, because it's a, if it's in the overall interest of your loved one, the one way I got around my mother not having a bath was to tell her, you know what, the water is going to be turned off in 10 minutes, because that's the one memory she had of her Bombay days, that there was such limited supply of water that everybody would have to have a bath by 5 o'clock in the morning. So she remembered that. And the moment I mentioned that, she would be in the shower in a flash.
It's bigger.
So it's one example of lying. You have to do it, and then you go beg forgiveness later.
Thank you.
Back to you, Edie.
Thank you. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Ishwar and Jayashree, for an eye-opening discover of the real life of caregivers and caregiver stressors. So, as we heard, there's a lot of information out there, and it takes a lot of research to find things that are trusted and high quality answers. You don't have them immediately when and where you need them. We worry about where the answers come from. We read things on the internet, and we know there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. And we're stressed about balancing caregiving and the rest of our lives, especially if we're still working. So Amicus Brain is here for the caregivers of the world. Our AI advisors apps provide knowledge, advice, resources, and a safe and private community that's always one place available to you. It's 24/7, where you can have private, safe, and secure conversations and connect with peers, as well as get some deeper education. So I'd like to invite everyone to please check out our website, amicusbrain.com, and you can request a solution of our demos and see what this stuff looks like in action. So thanks so much for sharing your stories with us today. And thank you everyone else for joining and participating.